Welcome to Faith Family United Church of Christ. Sorry we're a little late. I just wanted to remind everybody in college and in seminary that when you show up for class on time and the professor's not there, you give him 15 minutes of grace time. And after 15 minutes, you can leave.
I thought you had to be a doctor to get that 15 minutes. Doctorate.
No.
Not just a professor.
You can have a master's of divinity. Okay. So I'm sorry. Today we're starting in. Of course, we're doing studies in Luke, and we're starting on chapter 21. And this we're working on our last bit. We've only got 3 more chapters in Luke. So okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So, chapter 21 starts out and talks about the widow's offering. And, of course, we've used this a couple times, and I'm sure the church has used it many, many times in lessons on tithing. So, let's go ahead and look at that. 21, he looked up, we're talking about Jesus, and saw rich people putting their gifts in the treasury. They're putting their offerings in the pot at the temple. He also saw a poor woman, a poor widow, put in 2 small copper coins. He said, "Truly I tell you, this poor woman has put in more than all of them, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on." Wow. That's a devoted person.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? First thoughts, right off the bat.
Well, the rich people sometimes make sure their offerings are seen and known.
Okay.
And they don't give, like he said, they give out of their abundance. It's not something they would miss. There's no sacrifice there.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for. That's the word I was thinking about too. You know, we talk about that. We say that, right? We say, "Oh, I'm sacrificing." Are you really?
Yeah.
You know, we talk about giving 10%, and we think that 10% is a lot. And man, that's too much for, this month I can't give 10% or whatever. But think about it. When you have a meal or you go to the store and you buy something, what's the tax rate here in Hillsborough County?
It depends on what you buy.
7.5. And then they sometimes have local taxes on top of that.
Yeah.
And so you're almost at 10% anytime you buy something. So I don't think 10% is really that much. I once saw a pastor who, him and his family lived on 10% of his income.
Well, they paid him well.
He lived on 10%, and
They paid him lots and lots of money.
the other 90% he used for tithing and charity.
Wow.
And that's commendable. You know, you would like to be at a place in your life, and you think about it. You think about it. How much stuff in our lives do we really need? How, could we do without a lot of the stuff that we have?
Most of what we acquire is out of wants, not needs.
I agree with that.
I just want to say that it's not just about money, it's about time.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times some of the poorest people are the ones giving most of their time, and someone who has wealth and maybe more time says, "Well, how much do you need? I'd rather give you money than go there or the time." Yeah. So again, I think too, it's not just about the financial offerings. It's a lot of times the less fortunate are the ones who do the majority of the work. Yeah.
What about the giving? Let's talk a little bit about the abundance, giving out their abundance. What do you think about that?
Again, it's not something that they would miss. It's something that they would have just blown anyway, or they would have not.
Yeah.
It's not affecting their savings or their quality of life in any way. It's
exactly. It's just, oh, here, chump change. you know, and I always when I see this, I think of rich people. I think of the really rich people, the Jeff Bezos and the
Elon Musk.
I ain't gonna say his name. Anyway, you think of those people and you think, how much do they give? But when they do give, they make sure they know you know it.
Right. They announce it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were talking on the way to church about a well-known doctor that built this really big mansion, but by the same token, he's built schools and he's built,
Exactly.
he's given out to others. And when someone challenged him on his mansion, he said, I understand your concern, but he said, I deserve to have something for myself, but I've given abundance that I don't even think you are aware of. And that's true.
And I think of LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's really rich, but you see some of the things he does, and he doesn't announce it. He doesn't like brag about it.
You should see the schools
That's
that
what
are
I'm
behind
saying.
him.
He
Yes, in
builds
Akron, where
schools.
he went to school.
That
Yes.
is amazing, and that's what you want to see with someone with that much clout and
He
money.
was raised in a Catholic school,
Yeah, I know he went to Catholic high school.
St. Vincent, St. Mary. Yes.
They actually televised his high school games on ESPN.
Right.
It's like,
But
hey,
he was, at one point, he was a receiver,
yeah.
Mhm.
and now he's giving back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So you can see the what Jesus is pointing out here.
Right.
This woman gave what she had to live on, and she's a widow, and in their religion, that's the big thing. What's the main purpose is to take care of orphans and widows, and that's one thing that Paul says in the New Testament. Is that's what we're supposed to do. And so here, this widow, she's given away. She's trusting God,
Mm-hmm.
and she's trusting those around her to do the right thing and to take care of her. And she's willing to give her. Now that's sacrifice, because now you're completely relying on God, and Jesus points her out. And I hopefully, by Jesus pointing her out, that's where her faith is, or her prayers are answered in those around Jesus seeing this. Oh, we need to take care of her because she is a faithful woman. Okay, so let's move on. The destruction of the temple foretold. Okay, now Jesus kind of foretell that before that things are going to get bad, and you're going to reject me, and you're going to be wiped basically out of Jerusalem. And so here he's speaking again. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, he said, as for these things that you see, the day will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be torn down. Wow. And guess what happened? Let's see. This he's probably talking about between 30 and 36 AD, after his birth. So he's about 33 years old, and depending on how you see when his birth was, sometimes people say it was 4 BC, and we kind of say no, his birth was on 0 because that's when we started the calendars. But anyway, so the temple was torn down in the 70s, and not one stone was left. The whole temple was leveled completely, all down to the foundation, and that's what you see today is that foundation. So, but what else does Jesus talk about? We see this later. They remind us that. What is Jesus? Is Jesus talking about the temple?
No.
What's he talking about when he talks about that?
Judaism and organized Jewish religion will basically cease to exist, which happened right after during the dispersion.
Yeah,
It was only kept alive by the faithful.
But later on, the disciples come to the conclusion that Jesus wasn't talking about the temple here. He's talking about his body. How it's going to be torn down. And this is a little different here than Matthew and Mark, because later on he says, and it will be rebuilt in 3 days, but he doesn't say it here, because he's talking about the temple here and not his body. And that's what Luke is trying to point out, that he predicted this. Now Luke is writing after the destruction of the temple, so he knows this as being fact, and he's like, oh my gosh, Jesus predicted that. Okay, so signs and persecutions. They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be, and what will be the signs that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you do not led astray, for many will be in the name and in my name. Many will come in my name and say, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately. Then he said to them, nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be an earthquake, and in various places famines and plagues, and they will be dreadful
portents.
They will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make your minds not to prepare for defense in advance, for I will give you your words and the wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls.
Sounds like what we're going through right now.
Okay, let's go over this really carefully, because Jesus is talking about two things here. What are the two things he's talking about? What did they ask him first?
When is it going to happen?
And what is that? The destruction of the temple, correct?
Yeah.
He just did the destruction of the temple, and now they're saying, when is this going to happen? And he says, beware of those that will say that this is happening and the time is near. Do not go after them. Okay? That's not necessarily talking about the future. We're still talking about that time. People come after Jesus. You think of some of the people that came after Jesus, and you look at the Acts of the Apostles. There was Bar-Jesus came after, and Simon, who was looking to get the gift of the Holy Spirit so he could do miracles and get paid. And there were people that were calling themselves Christian before the destruction of the temple, after Jesus had died, and leading people astray. Okay, so that's back then. We see it today. Turn on your TV on Sunday morning. Yeah, you see it.
Yeah.
People that are trying to do nothing more than to make money for themselves, and they in the name of Jesus. Okay, so when you hear of wars and instructions, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately. Okay, so the wars and the insurrection, that's what caused the temple to be destroyed. They rose up and said, no more, Rome. And Rome said, okay, no more, and wiped them off the face of Jerusalem, scattered them all over the place. So he's still at that time frame But what does he say? The end will not follow immediately. Interesting. He said, even though this happens, that's not the sign that the end will happen. And then he goes on about earthquakes, nation will rise up against nation, famines, plagues, and dreadful portents, and great signs from heaven. Okay, so that's the time that we're living in. We're seeing this nation rise up against nation. So that is, and it says, you know, this is nearing the end here. Before all this occurs, okay. Now he was talking about the end, so he was kind of getting convoluted here. So at first I'm telling you about the destruction of the temple, and this is going to happen. There are rumors of wars and insurrections, but the end isn't near at that point, just the destruction of the temple. Now, nation's going to rise up against nation, there's plagues, there's famine, there's all this stuff, and that's kind of the signs that the end is coming. But before this occurs, okay, before all that occurs, now we're going to go back and talk about the temple again. Does that make sense now?
Mm-hmm.
So now he's talking back about the temple and about their time. And they're going to be arrested, persecuted, handed over to the synagogue and prison, and you will be brought before kings and governors in my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. Okay, so now he's saying, you know, what's going to happen to you before all this other stuff, before the end comes near, because it's not going to come immediately, but this stuff is going to happen. And it's an opportunity to testify about what you've seen and what you understand. So make up your minds not to prepare for your defense in advance. That's a good quote there. And we all need to remember that. Okay. There was a song by a Christian artist that I knew. I knew him. And his song was "The Bitter Root," and he says, "Don't let the bitter root get you." And the bitter root was in your mind, thinking of all the things that this person's going to say, and all the nasty things you're going to come back with, and you're going to show him. And so, don't prepare your defense in advance. In other words, don't prepare yourself for what you think they're going to say and how nasty they're going to be. And that's the bitter root that the singer was talking about. This idea that if you meditate on those kind of things, then you're not going to be really prepared to actually face the person, listen to what the person's saying, and respond to that. Because you've already, in your mind, know what this confrontation, instead of a discussion or instead of a simple defense, is going to be. But rather, you're prepared, you got the chip, you put it on your shoulder, and you're just waiting for someone, you know. So that I love that statement there. And Jesus says, don't do that, because I will give you the words to say. Even though that your parents and your brothers and relatives and your friends might rise up, even to the point of being against you and sentencing you to death or putting you to death. Okay? But still, your endurance will gain your soul. By your endurance, you will gain your soul. Wow. So, when trials and tribulations come, don't use them as a way to grumble, complain, turn around and use the same things against them, but rather testify. Use it as a testimony. I was thinking about that when I was taking a shower this morning. I was thinking about bad influences. You know, you talk about that as parents. You tell your kids, oh, you know, be careful for that guy or that person because they're I think they're a bad influence on you. Why don't we talk about the good influences? Why don't we talk about the people that are good influences on us? We don't do it. We just talk about the bad influential people. Anyway, just something that I was thinking about. I was like, we need to tell people that they're good influences. You know, we're quick to tell people they're bad influences, but I think that's the idea of testimony. I think it was Saint Absalom. He was he was a priest first of all, but he was also a monk, and he wrote something one time. It says, every day of your life, all the time, preach the gospel. Every day. And if you have to, use words.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea of a good influence, you know? And maybe that's the way we get to some of the people that are so adamantly against us, is we act in that way. So. Okay, any other questions or comments about how Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple, the end of time, and the idea of using your influence or your good influence to gain your souls? I don't touch that right now. So, okay, the destruction of Jerusalem foretold. So now he goes, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know its desolation has come near. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those inside the city must leave, and those out in the country must not enter it. For these are the days of vengeance, as a fulfillment of fulfillment of all that is written. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be a great distress on the earth, and wrath will come against the people. They will fall on the edge of their swords and be taken away as captives, and all nations, all Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So, once again, what's he talking about? Talking about Armageddon, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
No?
No. I think he's going back and he's telling them, this is the destruction of Jerusalem. This is the destruction of the temple.
This is the day of reckoning.
Yeah, I think for the Jews, right? But then he goes on again to talk about, there at the end, he talks about the captives among you, and Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So after the destruction, there'll be a time when the Gentiles, basically the Christian era, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's that?
I don't know.
The time of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
My version says barbarians.
Okay. Well, let's just take a look. Shall we? Gentiles. Where's it at?
24.
Okay. So there's Gentile. It says the time of the barbarians are fulfilled.
That's what this version says.
Okay. So let's see, what is that?
It says Jerusalem will be under the boot of the barbarians until the nations finish what was given them to do.
Okay. So the word there is ethnos, where we get ethnicity from. So it's nations until the time of the nations. This is Gentiles also, yeah. So in this case, you can see here it says, where it says Gentiles and Gentiles, the word is actually ethnos, or ethnos, excuse me, ethnos, and just like the nations, or in Jewish thought, anything that wasn't Jewish was up there. Was Goy, was the people, or the nations, the other nations. Okay, so Jerusalem will be trampled by the nations, probably the Romans, until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Questions about that? Comments? I like the way that this breaks it down into little parts that we can talk about. Because so often we get this big long paragraph on all these things that we're talking about, and it sounds like he's talking about one subject. But you can see if you break it down, he's talking about different things. Okay, so the coming of the Son of Man. So who is the Son of Man? Jesus. Okay. Where does he get that title from? Or where does he take that from? Do you know?
When he was baptized, this is my son in whom I am well pleased.
Okay. But there's a reason why Jesus uses the Son of Man to identify himself.
Messiah?
And yeah, exactly. It is the idea of the Son of Man is the Messiah, the chosen one. But that comes from Daniel, the book of Daniel. And it talks about the Son of Man in Daniel. And so, as a prophecy, a book of prophecy, he's saying the Son of Man is here now. I am the Son of Man. I am the one that the prophecy is talking about. So, when you think about the Son of Man, you should, in the back of your mind, be thinking, oh, he's talking about Daniel, and that makes you want to go read the book of Daniel. Okay, so I'm going to brag about myself. I read the book of Daniel, which took place in Babylon, right? Babylon. I read the book of Daniel in Babylon when I was over in Iraq. We were stationed on the ruins, or the archaeological dig site of Babylon, the ancient city of Babylon. I decided I was going to read the book of Daniel there. So, okay, so moving on. Sorry. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. What are we talking about here? This is the second coming. This is Jesus coming back a second time. So this is the end. So you can see how he keeps bouncing back and forth. We talked about the destruction of Jerusalem, and then the time will come for the Gentiles, or the nations to be, the Jews are going to be scattered. And then the coming of the Son of Man, when this happens, this is the end. He's going to be coming in a cloud with power and great glory. That's what we talk about, Jesus coming the second time in the clouds. Everybody will hear him, everybody will see him, and they'll know. And that's what Jesus is saying here. This is what we think about when we think about Armageddon. This is the final call. This is it. Questions? Comments? And then to wrap it all up, we hear Jesus says, then he told them a parable. So he tells all this stuff, and it's kind of confusing, and so he's going to try to tell us a parable, and hopefully we can understand. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you will know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass pass away. Mm. Questions, or just kind of quiet?
Very confusing, and it leads to a lot more questions than it answers, because it talks about this generation will not pass away before this happens. But of course, here he's probably talking about his resurrection, but he was just talking about the second coming, so it's led to a lot of confusion for theologians and people trying to understand what Jesus meant here, which I don't think we fully comprehended even now.
I don't think so either.
I just think he's trying to say, be on guard, be ready.
Okay, that's the main thing, and we see that several other places. And he talks about parables where the idea is not to all of a sudden, I've got my wick stands and we're lighting our lamps and all of a sudden, it took a little bit longer than expected. Now we're running out of oil for our lamps. But always be on guard and not, show yourself as being this highly religious and highly spiritual person and then it fade away. But always be on guard, like Cindy said.
Well, it's hard to always be vigilant as a Christian. We can become complacent in our, especially in America, where we become complacent in our thoughts that Christianity will always be there for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not as vigilant about making sure that we maintain our faith because we take it for granted. But he's saying don't do that, because that's the actual enemy of furthering the kingdom of God. When we become complacent and we stop doing good, we stop praying, we stop helping others, we don't see a need, so why do we have to help them? It's a real danger.
Sorry, I have to fix that's that. And then, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you said that. Did you read ahead a little bit? Okay. So, the next part, the last part, be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with
dissipation.
Thank you. And drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap, for it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man. Every day he was teaching in the temple, and at night he would go out and spend the night on the Mount of Olives, as it was called. And all the people would gather up early in the morning and listen to him in the temple. Okay. So kind of wraps up that scene of what Luke is trying to portray here, and how the main point is, like Cindy said, the main point is just be on guard. Know that these things happen, but be on guard.
And keep your faith.
And keep your faith. Don't struggle away. Don't be dissipate. Don't be way down with dissipation, but rather, oh, things are getting worse. What am I going to do? I think I'll go get drunk, or something to that.
Go
effect.
shopping.
Yeah.
Or go shopping, or
go
go
spend a
do
lot of money on shopping, or go down a rabbit hole. Anyway, so I think that kind of wraps up the whole thing, like Cindy had said, and I said I asked her if she read ahead, because that's the main point, and I think that's the point that Luke is trying to bring this all to a close. Is, hey, the temple was destroyed. We're now living in this next time when Christians, all the followers of Christ, are being challenged, and we don't see this as necessarily the end. We see this as a way that we can talk about our faith and talk about the gospel.
And it fits into today's scenario.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that we are the real remnant, not necessarily the evangelical church. They've kind of turned their back on some of these teachings. So while we get upset about politics and things that are happening, it's also a distraction.
Oh yeah, that's don't be distracted. Don't
Yeah.
be weighed down by this stuff. Just use the opportunities you have to tell people about the gospel. And what is the gospel? What is the gospel all about? Well, thank you very much. No, thank you. I thought you'd sleep all through my sermons, and here you know.
Whoa, he's calling you out.
He recognizes my nod.
Because you're agreeing.
Yeah.
All right, so next week we're in chapter 22. We're getting there. Jesus is almost at the cross, and we'll see the cross and the resurrection in the next couple chapters.
Thank you.